I want to tell you why I call myself the hacker, pusher, and dinker from hell. You know, we all have different personalities, which can affect how we play, in a good way or a bad way. My DNA personality made me an extremely competitive person, so when I first got into tennis as an adult, I had no interest in being a social player. In other words, I didn't play tennis to make friends or to get some exercise. I played to win because winning is fun, while losing is not fun. I wasn't antisocial, but being social just wasn't my top priority when playing a match. I therefore did whatever I had to do to win. Of course, I played by the rules and was always an honest line caller, but I always only had one objective in mind, and that was to win the point, every point, by whatever means necessary. I quickly learned that tennis is a very simple game, in that the winner of the point is the person that gets the last ball over the net. So that became my only objective, and I therefore didn't care how I did it, as proper form didn't matter to me, as one doesn't get extra credit for having proper form or more credit for hitting a great shot or a winner. I guess I was born a hacker, pusher, and dinker because instinctively I did not like giving points away. So I tried as hard as possible not to make errors and always tried to force my opponent to hit a great shot or a winner to win a point. I liked the fact that I'd get the same amount of credit if my opponent made an error, and that excited me as I didn't have to hit a great shot or a winner to get a point. I also learned that I didn't have to wait for my opponent to make an error, but that I could force, encourage, entice, or cause my opponent to make an error and win the point. My number one goal quickly became not to make errors and to force my opponent to get a point, which I later learned is the basic trademark of all hackers, pushers, and dinkers. I also learned that tennis is not just a technical or physical game, but is also a psychological, emotional chess match. The best players at every level understand and believe that fact, and therefore use their brains and not just their strokes to win matches. The proof in everything I'm saying is I was managing to win most all of my matches and was enjoying the thrill of victory against what I thought were better tennis players than me. Some with better technique, some with more athletic ability, and some with more experience. I of course didn't and don't win all my matches, as there are no undefeated players in tennis, never has been, never will be, but I make sure that I never beat myself. However, a pattern developed as I eventually started hearing the H word, the P word, and the D word, hacker, pusher, dinker. I didn't know what that meant, but I could sense that it was not very complimentary. Instead of my opponents congratulating me on my victories, I was getting negative, hostile vibes from many of my defeated victims. At first I thought they were simply frustrated, sore losers, unwilling to accept the agony of defeat, or mad because they felt they'd lost to a weaker tennis player that they should have crushed. But I then started sensing hostility, contempt, and subtle ridicule for the way in which I had achieved my victories. They didn't like my playing style and my lack of proper form. They didn't consider it real tennis. I was confused and could not understand what I had done wrong. I had worked very hard for my much-deserved victories. I had fought as if my life depended on it. But I finally came to realize and accept my fate and destiny. I was a hacker, pusher, and dinker. I could not understand why my fellow tennis players made me feel guilty or shameful simply because I was a hacker, pusher, and dinker. I felt like an outcast and a second-class citizen. I soon learned that I was not the Lone Ranger, as there are hackers, pushers, and dinkers like me all over the world whose similar style of play is held in contempt and disliked. We're all consistent and often called dogs, retrievers, or backboards, as we don't like making errors, and we often hit with no pace, but with good placement, which seems to annoy normal tennis players. It's a fact that hackers, pushers, and dinkers have to put up with lots of unjust verbal abuse in the tennis community, some subtle and some explicit. If I had $1 for every time I was called an XXX hacker, pusher, and dinker, I would be rich and own my own tennis club in Tahiti or Cancun. However, I finally got tired of the verbal abuse and disrespectful way in which many of my victims were treating me, so I decided to take pride in my style of play and to call myself the hacker, pusher, and dinker from hell. I put my name on my tennis shirt as I wanted my opponents to know that they were about to play their worst nightmare and to use my ugly, unappreciated, and disrespected playing style to my psychological advantage, and to let my opponents know up front that they were about to play the hacker, pusher, and dinker from hell, and that they were going to have to fight like a mad dog for every point they wanted to win. It worked, as in the last 40 years of playing recreational tennis tournaments and leagues, I can't count how many technically better and physically stronger tennis players I have beaten. I'm not bragging, it's just a fact that I have been able to consistently beat better tennis players with my brain by exploiting their emotions and getting them to lose their patience, as the loss of one's patience is the #1 factor that causes tennis players to make unforced errors, and that's how I get most all my points. In quoting Muhammad Ali, I'm not conceited, I'm just convinced. Not that I'm the greatest, but that my playing style works, and that's why I believe that I can make anyone a mentally tougher, smarter, more intelligent, and therefore a better tennis player.